Hey, so in this video, I'm gonna share with you 5 different tactics that you could utilize to grow your credit score as fast as possible. Now, the big issue with credit scores is that they usually take a really long time to build up. But in this video, I'm gonna share with you a few different tactics that you could use to really grow that a lot faster if you need to boost it in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I think this video might help you out. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. All right, so let's start this with the most important one that can really boost your score very quickly. I'm talking 30 days, 45 days, maybe 60 days, and you can boost your score very quickly. This is great for people who have no credit history or possibly bad credit history. So anything really below 600 isn't necessarily too good for credit score. Now, it's okay if you have a bad credit score. You can build it up over time, and that's the key here. So the best way to do this in a very short period of time, and this usually works, I'm going to share with you a few tips within here that you're going to want to be careful of, and so that you can sort of weave through this road and make sure that you get to the right place you need to be. So one of the best ways to do this is by becoming an authorized user under somebody else's account. Now, I'm going to leave a couple of links down below, some sources from discover.com, from Credit Karma, just to sort of give you more information about this, because there's a lot of misconceptions about becoming an authorized user and how you can kind of piggyback off of somebody else's credit score, but it's totally possible if you do it right. So let me explain this to you. So you can actually become an authorized user under somebody else's account. So this could be your parents, this could be your sister, your brother, maybe even your kid if they have a really good credit score with a long credit history, or a friend. And if they have good credit, I would say anywhere from 760 or above, or maybe 750 and above, what you can do is they can actually add you as an authorized user. Now, what's gonna happen is you're gonna get a credit card with your name on it, but it's under their account. So they're actually legally liable to pay off your bills in a sense, and you personally as the authorized user aren't liable for this. Now, one of the biggest questions that people have though is they say, wait a minute, if I was the person who is letting somebody become an authorized user under me, am I going to be affected from their poor credit history? And the truth is no, you're not going to be. So if, say, your parents were adding you as an authorized user, your parents' credit is not going to be affected by you being on there as an authorized user. Just keep that in mind and share that with them if you're trying to convince somebody to add you to their credit card as an authorized user. Now, you want to be careful with co-signing. This is another method that people use. Co-signing, it can kind of create some problems, because what you're gonna have to do eventually is close that account, and that could hit your credit score a little bit. We can talk more about co-signing and the negatives of that in the future. It's not always bad, but usually I think becoming an authorized user could be a better bet for a lot of people. So here's the part where you really have to pay attention. So what can usually happen, and what does typically happen, is that you as the authorized user, well, you'll get reported to the major credit bureaus, the people who score credit scores. You'll actually get reported separately from the person who added you as an authorized user. So all of a sudden, you basically piggyback off of the person who signed up for you. So if they have a credit score of 800 and you're an authorized user under them, there's a good chance, assuming that they report you separately, which typically does happen, that your score will go up tremendously. I'm talking 50 points, maybe even 100 points sometimes, even more sometimes. There's stories of people jumping even 120, 130 points in literally just 30 days from this happening. So you can piggyback off of this, but this is where you really do need to pay attention here, because this isn't always the case. See, after the subprime mortgage crisis of 2007, FICO sort of changed the way that they actually score credit scores and how they actually look at them, and now they actually weigh the authorized user piggybacking method a little bit less. So what can happen here, just because your score shoots up because you sort of piggyback off of this person's credit score, what can happen though is that, say your score goes from 580 to 690 or something, right? So your score goes from pretty bad to pretty decent. So say it shoots up to 690 and you apply for a new credit card, or you apply for a mortgage or an auto loan. Well, what can happen with some of the banks, they can look deeper into it and say, wait a minute, you're just an authorized user. You never had a credit card where you actually had to pay it off yourself, and they can look deeper into it and they can actually reject you for some of those loans. So it's not always the best method, but it's a great way to boost it initially. And sometimes they do use old methods for pulling credit and they're not really looking too deep into it. They're just kind of looking at the number. But like I said, ever since 2007, they've been getting a little bit smarter with that. But it's still a great way to boost it very quickly. Another method you could use while you're doing this authorized user piggyback method, you can also open up a secured line of credit separately to sort of help boost it a little bit more. So that's just a really important tip that a lot of people don't even know it really exists. If you have really poor credit or you have no credit, definitely look into that one. It's definitely a tremendous way to boost your credit as fast as possible. Now, there's 4 other strategies that you really should be aware of if you're trying to grow your credit score as fast as possible. And the next one is another thing that a lot of people don't realize you can do, and this is by actually writing to the credit bureaus. I'm talking about a physical letter, writing it to the 3 major credit bureaus and disputing certain things on your old credit report. So just to give you an example of this, there was a man who got divorced and his wife, it was settled by the courts that she legally owed him a certain amount of money for certain payments that was under his name, and she didn't pay him, so he couldn't pay off the loans, so he defaulted on the loans. Hopefully you followed that there. He defaulted on the loans, and then he kind of got screwed over and his credit score tanked. Well, he actually disputed this and he got it taken off by writing to the credit bureaus. So there's different things within there. Sometimes there's some smaller things within there, like missed payments that you might kind of miss, but they happened 3 years ago. You can actually write letters and dispute this. If I were you, I would Google this. There's all kinds of PDFs and different outlines that you could use, kind of just like fill in the blank type of things that you could use to send these letters to the credit bureaus. And as soon as this happens, as soon as you get some of these old things that are sort of dragging down your credit score, as soon as you get them off, all of a sudden, your credit score can really shoot up very, very quickly. I'm talking 30 to 60 days. It can shoot up very quick. Now, another way to keep your credit score growing in the short run is to avoid hard pulls or hits on your credit. And this is really important. Say that 3 months from now or 2 months from now, you are thinking about getting a new car and you want to get a $20,000 loan for your new car. Say it's 45 days from now or 60 days from now. Well, you're going to want to plan this out a couple of months before and not get any hard pulls on your credit. So what this can mean is don't try to open up more credit cards 60 days before trying to get a car loan, or don't try to get a car loan right before you try to get a home loan. Those are just a couple examples there of how they could negatively affect your credit, because every time somebody is doing a pull on your credit, every time that somebody is checking your credit, in a hard pull, not a soft pull, there's a difference there, but with a hard pull on your credit, it's actually going to decrease your credit score, sometimes 10, 15, 20 points or more for a hard pull on your credit. So in the short run, keep that in mind. Try to avoid those hard pulls. In the long run, it doesn't really matter so much. If you're thinking about getting a house next year, it doesn't really matter if you open up a credit card now. It might dip your score by 10 or 20 points, but not too much. So I wouldn't worry about it in the long run. Okay, now 2 more here, really incredibly important. If you're trying to get that 800 credit score or 850, some million people now have an 850 credit score, but it's just so difficult to actually get that. There's 2 really important keys that you need to understand here, and this is keeping your utilization incredibly low. I'm talking anywhere from 1 to maybe 10%. Once you get up higher than 10%, that's when you're going to start to get into the territory where these credit card companies are actually going to find you a little bit more risky, and so your score is going to decrease ever so slightly. So what I try to do, I try to keep my credit utilization at around 5%, maybe 3 or 4% is pretty good as well. And what this means is that if you have, say you have a credit limit of $10,000, well, you're probably going to want to spend maybe $500 or less per month out of your $10,000 limit per month just to keep that utilization really, really low. Once you get up to 10, 20, 30, 40% or more, that's when you're going to see your credit score starting to slip a little bit. So keep it very low. This makes up a very large portion of your FICO score. Just keep that in mind. Now, the last one that I want to share with you is also very, very important. And this is simply just paying off your minimum payment every month. Sometimes we'll see people who will rack up $3,000 in credit card bills for a particular month. And then they'll say, I don't have $3,000, I can't pay it off. So they'll just kind of forget about it and just say, you know what, I'll pay it off next month. And they don't pay the minimum payment. And as soon as you don't pay that minimum payment, it counts as a default and your credit score is going to get hit really hard for not paying off that minimum payment. So if you're going to carry a balance, which I wouldn't recommend doing because you're paying 20, 25% interest sometimes on those balances on your credit, well, if you're going to do that, at least pay off the minimum payment every month. It's just so incredibly important to do that. It's a foolish mistake not to, and it's going to hurt you for quite literally years to come if you just miss that one payment. So what I do is I set up auto payments directly from my bank to my credit cards so that I will never ever forget about it, and that saves me a lot of worry instead of trying to time it perfectly and pay off your credit card right before it's due. So those are 5 different tactics that you could utilize to increase your credit score as fast as possible. I think the biggest problem people have, they want to increase it in like the next week or 2 weeks. And it's not that easy to do that. I think the first 2 methods that I share with you are very important, and those are probably the best ways to increase it in the short run. But in reality, it's going to take a long time to build credit. It really is. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.